A recent trend I've been noticing in YouTube's reactionary rageosphere is the uptick in videos about Captain Marvel, Marvel's upcoming film starring Brie Larson. This is the first movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to star a woman, and there's been some talk in the media about how this is a big deal. Maybe not as much as it would have been had Wonder Woman not come out 2 years ago, but hey, it's still a departure from the typical white male lead. The idea of a woman attracting a female audience, and this perhaps being a good thing, had the predictable result of upsetting some people with reactionary opinions, and the deluge of videos began.
Now that everyone's trying to push this stupid political agenda, which I don't want in my movies, they are trying to push that.
This movie is utter boo-boo. It is trash, it is caca, it is poo-poo, it is garbage.
The Captain Marvel movie is going full SJW. They are already developing a cult-like, feminist-led following online.
It's a pattern we've seen before with the Black Panther movie, the She-Ra cartoon, or plenty of other types of media that try to appeal to a broader demographic than the stereotypical white male fan base. To that unhappy crowd, though, this is seen as trying to appease the SJWs, who supposedly control the entertainment industry. And since this is supposedly only something SJWs care about, a bunch of people who know nothing about running a business are now claiming that this SJW-style diversity will shatter these billion-dollar companies. This, in essence, is what is meant by the phrase, "get woke, go broke." An axiom that must be true because, well, it rhymes. The phrase originated from a 2018 interview with sci-fi author John Ringo. In the article, Ringo describes tension towards conservative voices following the 2000 presidential election in the United States, where George W. Bush was elected president over Al Gore. The rage at this electoral result had an effect on the convention Ringo went to. According to Ringo, the convention then pushed its conservative members out of its planning committee. Attendance dropped over years, and it's now defunct. Get woke, go broke, he says of any organization who bows to SJW pressure. The term "get woke, go broke" gained traction over the years, perhaps most notably around one of gaming's dumber controversies, the appearance of a woman with an artificial arm in Battlefield 5. From what I can gather in videos about this, the inclusion of this female character was a gross betrayal of Battlefield's artistic vision, as understood by its fans. YouTuber Jeremy Hambley explains here.
The uproar wasn't exactly that women were in the game, it was that they were featured so prominently and had fake plastic or robot arms. A not insignificant amount of people like Battlefield 5 based on its realism.
Full disclosure here, I don't play or know much about the Battlefield series, so my only experience is this one YouTube video where some guy jumps out of a fighter jet, shoots another guy in midair, and then steals his fighter jet. I guess this is the realism series is known for. But is there any truth to the claim Battlefield 5 has sold poorly because it's woke? It actually did sell below expectations. According to a recent earnings report from EA, Battlefield 5 sold 7.3 million units, which is 1 million units below expectations. But why? If you listen to the reactionary rageosphere, you'll get the simple answer that, in trying to appear woke, it drove away customers. The evidence for this is, I guess, YouTube videos that say it must be true. EA's side of the story, given during a conference call to its investors about its third quarter earnings report, is that the delay from August to November to launch the game and the game's lack of a planned multiplayer battle royale mode are what led to the lower than expected sales. And keep in mind, 7.3 million units, that's still a lot of games sold. But the official story has a rebuttal from Hambley, and it highlights just how little Hambley and critics like him understand about this subject when they boil it down to the simple reductionary phrase, "get woke, go broke."
Battlefield 5's underperformance to several factors. First was the game's month-long delay from October 19th to October 20th, which pushed the title into a busier holiday season. BS.
Well, it's hard to argue with something when you just call it bullshit, right? If you have to move the launch of a game to later in the year, will your sales expectations adjustments hold? Will that uncertainty be difficult to project? How do you respond to a host of other games your game wasn't supposed to be up against if it had launched in August? Could EA have possibly inflated those sales expectation numbers to comfort shareholders after the change?
BS.
Oh, okay, I guess that's the level of analysis we're getting here. What Hambley's suggesting is that EA is lying on this conference call to its investors. Here's the thing about that, though. It's actually against the law to lie on your earnings report and in statements to your investors. Class action lawsuits happen all the time when a stock performs poorly, and it can be argued that the company is lying to its investors. It's happening right now with Nvidia being sued for lying to its investors about its video card sales, and Activision Blizzard is being sued for letting Bungie leave their company. These class action suits are, in part, driven by claims made by the companies in their official statements to shareholders not being true. These lawsuits generally request the participation of investors who have lost at least $100,000 in the value of their stocks. It's an example of how we have a society that prioritizes the rich, with law firms literally filing dozens of press releases every day to get the attention of rich investors. It's almost as if the justice system is set up for the rich or something.
Prioritizing single-player content over Battlefield 5's still unreleased Battle Royale mode as a contributing factor to poor sales. Well, with I would say, I'm going to go ahead and say Apex Legends had a very successful launch with over 2.5 million people downloading and installing the software in the first 48 hours. I'm going to go ahead and say that the Battle Royale mode that is yet to come out for another month isn't going to save you because everybody's already going to be playing Fortnite, Pooberg, or now Apex Legends. It goes on.
So that's some especially bad analysis. The point EA is making in its conference call is that sales would have been better with stronger multiplayer content at launch. The response from Hambly is that multiplayer-centric games sell well, so he agrees with them? But the way he phrases it, it's as though he thinks he's contradicting them, as if EA is talking about future earnings when the call is clearly about its third quarter. This is just another example of how he doesn't seem to grasp what he's talking about.
The stock as it stands, zoinks. Okay, it had made a little bit of a recovery today, but then after this call came out, everybody bailed. It bottomed out at a massive drop of $95 all the way down to $75. That is probably nearly a 20% drop, and the outlook is not good. The way the stock market is reacting is also not good.
He looks at the stock and acts as though EA is in serious trouble. Losing 20% of your stock is, to be fair, pretty worrying. Or at least it would have been had it not recovered all of its value 2 days later, and even grown a bit. But the growth I mentioned came off the news of EA's Apex Legends doing particularly well. Apex Legends is a multiplayer shooter in the style of Fortnite, a battle royale shooter that, surprise surprise, was the style of game EA cited as their competition, which majorly undercut their Battlefield 5 sales.
Maybe Apex Legends is a massive success. 2.5 million players in the first couple days is pretty good. We're going to have to wait and see. I think they peaked out at 600,000 concurrent players. Very strong launch. Again, how many of these people will stick around and how many of these people will invest money into the game will ultimately decide if Apex Legends is any good.
The success of Apex Legends depends on whether or not it can get people playing and spending money on it. Brilliant! You may have also noticed that the video provided no real evidence for the get woke, go broke theory. This claim is especially popular with things that haven't come out yet, like the upcoming Captain Marvel movie. How do people know it's woke? How do they know it'll go broke? It's a prediction that is quickly forgotten in cases where it's wrong, and held up high in cases where it can be perceived as right. And I say perceived as right because even if a game like Battlefield 5 sells below expectations, you still have to provide evidence that it was because of supposed SJW messaging. That's part of the reason those Captain Marvel videos are popping up before the movie comes out. I'll make a prediction myself. It's almost certainly not going to piece of SJW-laden propaganda. Instead, it'll probably follow the formula of every other Marvel movie and make a bunch of money. There's already some evidence to back up that second claim. According to Box Office Pro, early ticket sales project that Captain Marvel is set to make over $140 million in its opening weekend. It's currently got the third best pre-sale of tickets for an MCU movie, only behind Infinity War and Black Panther. It's a lot harder to make those get woke, get broke videos when the movie you're talking about is verifiably not woke and making a shit ton of money. That's why it's important to release those videos before it comes out, rather than after. But just because these videos by Hambly don't provide real evidence doesn't mean that others haven't tried. YouTuber Alexander Grace released a recent video titled, "Scientific Study Reveals the Truth of Men's Happiness." This video describes a bit of supposed research that gained some traction amidst the backlash against that Gillette commercial released in early 2019, which asked men to be less toxic. This scientific study, or so the title of the video says, pushes back on the anti-toxicity concept and describes men as being happiest when they're productive at work, which, to be honest, sounds like capitalist propaganda. And it sort of is. But there's another layer at work here. Grace's commentary here isn't very interesting, as he mostly just reads some things and hems and haws about how interesting it is.
The second recommendation is health. Looking good and feeling good. The study says that it's not about some punishing physical routine, but more about holistic health that comes with looking after yourself with good exercise, good grooming, and a healthy diet.
So the second most important thing is health through exercise and grooming? Grooming does come up in the literature of positive psychology, but it seems slightly out of place here. It's really the second most important thing in making men happy? Really?
Much previous research into masculinity has negatively focused on the problems men cause, often through the nefarious concept of toxic masculinity. This has never been more so than in this post-Me Too landscape, and after every mass shooting or domestic terrorist incident.
The heart of the messaging I mentioned earlier is right here, a repudiation of the Me Too movement and toxic masculinity. There's the language that'll get the anti-SJWs humming.
I want to thank Dr. Harry and his entire team for this really valuable research.
Dr. Harry? Don't you mean...
This study was done by Dr. John Barry, co-founder of the Mayo...
Okay, he messed up. A slip of the tongue isn't a great catch, but just for fun, let's look at this supposed piece of research directly. This document is a bespoke US study for Harry's. I don't know what a bespoke study is supposed to be, but I've literally never heard it used in scientific research. And I still haven't. This document was, unsurprisingly, not published in any sort of peer-reviewed journal, at least according to a quick search in the records of PubMed and the APA. A peer review is the bare minimum you would need to be considered valid scientific research, or most academic research, to be honest. So where did this bespoke study come from? A quick look to the left will reveal that it was published by Harry's, a website that sells shaving products. That would explain why grooming was so high up on that list. The US paper is based on a British one done in 2017 that at least has the appearance of academic research, though I couldn't find any record of it being published in a peer-reviewed journal anywhere either. But what we're seeing here is actually something quite sinister, and that's marketing designed to look like scientific research. Companies push these out all the time, disguising market research or straight-up marketing as having some kind of scientific stamp of approval. When Grace says,
"This is the most up-to-date research that we have on masculinity, and the results are fascinating."
he's talking out of his ass. This isn't science, this is marketing. But why was Grace and his audience so willing to believe this? Probably because it fits into a narrative that when Gillette releases an ad that can be considered woke, they aren't speaking to a broad audience, but rather a small minority of SJWs who have overstated power and influence in society. For another example of not really understanding the data they're presenting, let's go back to Jeremy Hanley.
New scientific evidence has been put out in the form of a report called Hidden Tribes that confirms get woke, go broke. Yes, we have scientific standing now.
This is from a video titled Science Now Confirms Get Woke, Go Broke, a New Report. In this video, our hapless host looks at graphs, kind of reads them, and then concludes that trying to appeal to diverse audiences is an effort to appease a fringe group of progressives. There's no real information in this study on the purchasing habits of anyone, of course, just an argument that most Americans aren't being increasingly polarized and exist somewhere in the middle of the political spectrum.
Companies targeting what appears to be 10% of the population in any way, when that in any way turns off the other 90% of consumers, that's hence that is the literal definition of getting woke, going broke.
Let's boil down this argument a little. He believes that when companies include representation of diverse groups, this is something only progressive activists want. What is his evidence for this, though?
Among the general population, a full 80% believe that political correctness is a problem in our country. Even young people are uncomfortable with it, including 74% of people ages 24 to 29 and 79% under the age of 24.
Okay, so the issue is political correctness. There's still nothing about how this affects buying habits or what political correctness in media would be. It also presumes there is no conservative version of political orthodoxy. If the majority of Americans are tired of political correctness, shouldn't all these politically correct entertainment be bombing much harder? Shouldn't, for example, Battlefield 5 sales drop by something like 50% instead of 15%? The point of videos like this isn't real discussion or analysis. It's to tell the audience of the quartering channel that they are, in fact, the majority of people, that the rest of the world agrees with them. It's not them who are the outliers, it's the people who mock them. The Hidden Tribes report that Hambly presents does have some problems I'd like to mention, and I highly recommend this article from Vox that goes into detail on them. A short summary is that this report, while not entirely useless, needs to be understood in the broader context of social science research on the subject, and in that context it seems to be an outlier. One revealing quote from the article comes from Harvard University professor Ryan Enos. There have been many attempts to explain away partisan polarization over the years, but the consistent evidence is that it is increasing on the mass level in the last few decades. But here's the saddest fact in all of this. While the Get Woke, Go Broke crowd are pushing the idea that corporations are dancing to the tune of progressive activists in an effort to virtue signal, they're missing the real point. This is about marketing and making money. In all the examples I've mentioned, the Captain Marvel movie, Battlefield 5, the Gillette and Harry's razor campaigns, choices on what information and how to present it to the public were done with one thing in mind, and that's to make money from as many people as possible. Even guys like Jeremy Hambly almost understand this.
You never see a lot of these blue check marks ever talking about how the LGBT inclusion is just a marketing method these days. The thing is, nobody's playing this game because the characters are gay, and nobody's not playing it because of that. And when I say nobody, okay, there might be a few people that are really offended.
Hambly believes businesses do this supposed virtue signaling to prove their, SJW credentials, not that it might be effective. In the case of Apex Legends, the argument has morphed from wokeness drives away sales to wokeness has no impact on it. If that's the case, in what way does going woke mean going broke? What we have here are a number of people who are very angry that movies, video games, and other media have greater representation in them. And while I feel like a broken record on this now, I can't find any explanation for this anger that isn't based in some part on a form of discrimination. The problem is, representation itself is not even a real factor in their minds, or so they tell themselves. It's some sort of unspecified, vague SJW version. I don't understand how a game like Apex Legends, which has one white male character out of 8, doesn't constitute some sort of virtue signaling mess. If the representation in that game doesn't matter to Hambly, why does he even mention it? What exactly is the problem here? I suspect in the case of Apex Legends, it's just that this game really came out of nowhere and no one had time to react to its contents, so it was out and people were able to play it and enjoy it, and it was massively successful. There wasn't enough time to complain about the fact that the cast is so racially and sexually diverse. You can't really play your old tune of Get Woke, Go Broke if the obviously woke game is clearly not going broke. In the wake of successes of movies such as Black Panther and Wonder Woman, or video games such as Overwatch, all of which feature an abundance of representation of non-white male characters, I suspect that businesses noticed that representation can actually help sell your product. Certain businesses noticed that outrage can be triggered quite reliably, and more importantly, there's a blowback to that outrage. People talked about the Black Panther film in particular as a stand against white supremacy at the box office. It kind of was, but in a way that made Disney billions of dollars. When activism makes money, the market sees a chance to exploit that for profit. Far from wokeness driving down sales, it seems more likely that this is a tool used by corporations to make even more money. Look at this section from Harry's bespoke study. Much previous research into masculinity has negatively focused on the problems men cause, often through the nefarious concept of toxic masculinity. This has never been more so than in this post-Me Too landscape, and after every mass shooting or domestic terrorist incident. Lately, the dialogue has expanded to include the problems men have, such as the male suicide epidemic, depression, anxiety, and addiction, while offering scant few solutions. But Harry's wanted to progress this dialogue forward by flipping the telescope and focusing on what gives men a positive outlook. Also by our razors. And here's noted Nazi plagiarist Paul Joseph Watson cluing into it himself.
Gillette is merely exploiting a tried and tested method of marketing. Free advertising via virtue signal. By turning their brand into a viral news item, they just secured the equivalent exposure that would normally cost tens of millions of dollars.
All Gillette, Captain Marvel, and the rest need to make this sort of viral outrage happen is a bunch of hapless idiots raging about it. After all, you'll never have news outlets covering a story about the backlash to representation without having these useful idiots getting angry in the first place. Also, I think it's funny that even though Watson is aware that it's a scam, he still participates in the whole thing by creating a video about it. Gotta keep those angry guys in your audience frothing, I guess. While I can't provide much more than the marketing materials and creative elements of these media items as evidence, I do think the idea of a big corporation exploiting a demand for better representation in media for money is at least plausible. None of this can be stressed enough. This doesn't mean that representation is inherently a bad thing. And to be honest, if a business is going to pretend to have values, I'd rather they be inclusive and socially progressive instead of the traditional marketing of the past that emphasized a white cis hetero majority. But let's not pretend that these corporations are our friends or some sort of moral educator. They're trying to sell products by taking real problems of representation and folding that idea into their marketing. Let's just try to be smarter than the reactionaries who coin dopey phrases and play their role in generating online viral marketing. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like, maybe a comment or two, and hey, you can also subscribe. Thanks for watching.